Welcome to Beyond Rent, the property management podcast brought to you by Rent Manager. Each episode, we talk with industry experts about market trends and practical strategies for property management professionals. Now, let's get to the conversation and go Beyond Rent.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. Today we have Brent and Bryce from Kaliber Management joining us to talk about their business model and how it has enabled their growth. Brent and Bryce, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, really excited for this conversation. I'm always interested in how people grow a business, how they develop it, the decisions they make, and how it leads to their success and their opportunities that they often get themselves in front of. So really excited to learn more about what you two are doing with Kaliber, how it got started and so forth. And really to start the conversation out, it's probably best that we do some introductions. So if you want to go and introduce yourselves and tell us who you are, what you do for the company, I think that would be a good place to start. And Bryce, we can start with you.
Sounds good. So I'm Bryce McMurry. I'm the CEO for the company, and I've been in the real estate business. 2005, started buying real estate. Did single family, multifamily, commercial, and then eventually in 2016, kind of learned about MH, and 2015, 2016, somewhere in there, and so branched into MH, and then we purchased some RV around 2020, and so continued to grow that. So the business was founded by myself and my partner Lloyd Osafo, and we met in the military in 2009, and we've been investing together since. And so in my previous life, I did about a little over 20 and about 25 all total in the Army, and so this was a great second career, and it's been a phenomenal experience, and I think what I was put on this planet to do. So I love it. Having a great time.
Excellent.
Hey, my name is, I'm Brent Dudley. I'm the president of Kaliber Management. And so I've been with the company about the past 2.5 years, and I've been in real estate for about 8 to 10 years. That's been kind of my circuitous route. So, MH for the past 2.5, and prior to that, was with an organization that touched largely a big portion of the real estate industry, from development to home building to title, mortgage, and insurance, and just an ecosystem of other real estate type organizations. And then prior to that, I was in the consulting world for a long time, doing strategy and financial consulting for like Fortune 100 companies. And prior to that, I was a technology guy. So I've taken a weaving route in my career to get into the real estate industry. But, I think it's certainly a spot that I found with these guys that has quickly become a passion of mine. So something that I'm certainly excited to be a part of.
Yeah, thanks for those introductions. It's one of my favorite things is to learn about how people got where they are today. And some people, it's a very direct path. Other people, like you said, it's kind of a weaving path as you kind of pick up different skills and relationships along the way and have different insights. So I always love kind of hearing those stories. And Bryce, for you, having that military background, that's not the first time I've heard that as well. It seems like a lot of people that have military background find themselves in the real estate world or in the property management world. It's very interesting how that comes to be. And the comment you made as far as like you think this is what you were meant to do, I love hearing that, because I think we all have something that we're meant to do. And I don't know how many of us actually find it, right? So the fact that you found it, kudos to you. I don't know how hard it was to find it, but for many people, they search their whole lives for it.
Yeah, I definitely would. I definitely would agree with you. It's and sometimes you don't really know it until you get full into it. It's kind of interesting how when I never really intended to get into MH, and matter of fact, looking back on my younger years, I used to look at MH and be like, my gosh, that's terrible. Like, I want nothing to do with that. And once you learn what the product is, the value that it brings, how you're able to really help and transform other people's lives. All the time, our gals that are on our sales team tell me stories about, a single mom who's crying, and so, elated to be able to move into her new home that she never thought she'd be able to afford. And so just, when you can do those kind of things and transform communities, When you go in and you talk to the building official or the city, official, and they tell you that, they don't want your product or your type of people there. And then you're able to transform that. And then they come back and they, basically, recognize that you were able to change the community. It's just, you can't, there is no other experience like that. So it's really cool. And I love it. I love it. It's the best thing ever. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I love hearing those stories. From where I sit on the technology side, it is really easy to become disconnected with the end user, right? And I hate to say end user, but the end user of the product of our industry, which is housing, right? To get disconnected from the actual resident experience, whether they're in manufactured housing or multifamily, it doesn't really matter. That's somebody's home. And it's really easy to kind of get disconnected from that. But you're on the front lines, right? You're thinking about these things on a day-to-day basis. But you talked about how that's really inspiring for you to know that you can impact somebody's life, right? And how they live and their day-to-day experiences. But I'm assuming a lot of that came after starting Kaliber, not before. So what kind of turned the corner where you said, hey, I want to be involved in this space and I want to start this company?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding what the business model is. The business model is what enables that to occur. And that's that, we operate a tenant-owned home business model. So there's a reoccurring revenue stream there. And I think that when you're in that type of business, it gives you a financial ability to continue to expand and grow. And so you can offer something, you can create something that's a win-win for both you and the resident, right? And so the resident has an affordable place to live. You're able to create reoccurring revenue off of, once you get it to a stabilized position, you're now maintaining that asset and generating that reoccurring revenue. And I think that's really that's the secret sauce that makes the business work, So.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of people really don't understand the mechanics of that when they're outside the industry. They have to kind of get that education and understand how they focus on that. And I want to dive a little bit deeper in how Kaliber is structured. So can you maybe walk us through how you're structured as a company or maybe even multiple companies? I think there might be some separate entities involved that make you a little bit different than maybe what other people have seen in the MH space.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we like to talk about a lot because it's taken a long time to get here, but it's kind of fruitful. So, our company is basically split into three organizations. The top organization would be Kaliber Management. Kaliber Management, think of that like our operational arm. That's where all the people sit. It's our office location, and it's the team that manages all of our communities and the team that manages both MH and RV and houses, a lot of our personnel. It's technically the property management company, but it's a bit more than that. It's really our operational company. Next would be Kaliber Homes. Think of this like our dealer. So this is our home sales apparatus. This is what we use to basically floor plan homes to do infill projects in our communities. It's where our sales team sit, the overhead associated with them sits. And it's where all of our sales activity originates. So if we acquire a park and we take over some inventory, that sits with Kaliber Homes so that we can sell it. If we're floor planning lots of new inventory to sell, that's where that resides as well. And then our team that's out doing the actual groundwork, doing the sales, is part of that organization. And then third, and certainly not least, is Kaliber Construction. And this is where it starts to diverge a little bit for us. So this is truly a construction organization that's inclusive of equipment, of team members. We have master plumbers, electricians, HVAC, all of the team members that are kind of critical to the operation, but also team members that do site work and development and true construction projects as well. And why that's important for us is, all of our communities are individual entities, and so those three organizations exist and are truly vertically integrated to support all of our communities. We don't do it for outside companies. It's all for the Kaliber flywheel, if you will. And so our company is set up that way purposely so that we can manage and expand, our growth strategy in-house. So everything that we want to do, we can self-service for the most part.
Yeah, and I would have to think that setting it up that way really not only is it unique, but like you said, creates these opportunities that maybe other companies would struggle to see or get to because of lack of resources, right? They just can't move fast enough or make the right decision or maybe opt to take a little less on certain situations because you're actually looking at a deeper end goal. So you can maybe make different financial decisions as you go. Is that accurate to say that?
Yeah, that's very accurate to say that. For us, we've primarily grown through the early years through acquisition, right? And so we're buying value add assets. We're buying, underserved, undermanaged properties that, a lot of people would look at and say, maybe not. Maybe I'm looking for something more stable. But we looked at it as, no, that's an important part of it because to Bryce's earlier point, we want to leave things better than the way we found it, right? We want to create home ownership, and that doesn't always exist in brand new development. Sometimes we have to go take things that are there but need some work, and then we'll use our in-house resources to go do the work and get those stabilized, modernized, and kind of optically looking the way that we want them to look because we want people to be proud of where they live. We want to offer that opportunity. And sometimes, we look at those opportunities that, like I said, people don't normally look at and say, oh, I can see it. We actually have the ability to go do that. So it was very purposeful in design that we created the company around those 3 tiers.
And when you look at that idea of creating places that people can be, proud to own, proud to live in, how do you stay focused on that? And I would think over the years, there's been all types of other opportunities that have come up, or maybe if you go this direction and maybe cut a few corners, it could be a little more profitable. How do you stay focused on that? Because I think that's one of the areas that people fail long-term is they can't stay focused on what the initial goal was.
Yeah. So you're right. It would be very easy for us to get fragmented across, a larger geography and across a footprint that we just couldn't serve. And so we've been very cognizant to build our company from basically the Biloxi Gulfport area to the eastern side of Baldwin County. And the reason we chose that is our home base is right in the middle of that in Daphne, Alabama. And so it is about an hour in each direction to hit the border of our geography. And that allows us to deploy our construction team in a very efficient manner. We can keep our eyes on it. We can be at any one of our parks within an hour or two max. And it keeps us, focused on those things, to your point, so that if we know that there's something that's going on and we need to be there physically, we can be there. It's basically in our backyard. And we'll continue, our growth strategy is to continue growing in that corridor, kind of along the I-10 corridor that touches those areas that I mentioned, so that we can continue to do new development projects, which are a new part of our portfolio, as well as the acquisitions and renovations for those ones that there's a lot of them out there. And quite frankly, it's an exciting challenge for us to go buy those and do what we've already done many times and continue to build our organization that way. But, to stay focused, we kind of keep it, zeroed in that area. Now, I would love to say that we'll never look outside of that corridor, but this guy sitting next to me is not one that likes to sit idly by and just twiddle his thumbs, right? So we have targets all over the Southeast, but we're going to try to maintain our focus in that area for now as we build and grow. But that does not mean we won't look elsewhere as we continue to scale. So for us, it's taking what we have and keeping it really laser focused on the goal, but then scaling that model out beyond our kind of current boundaries.
Yeah, that's great to understand how all that breaks down because, again, staying focused is so hard, especially now that you kind of pinpoint a certain area of geography, right? It's an even smaller area. So when you are looking at existing parks, existing communities, what are some of the criteria that you're looking for? Because, again, if you have these high standards, you can't say yes to everything.
Yeah, I think so. To Brent's point, the first criteria is it's got to be something that's within that radius, that couple hour radius. And so, if you call me up and you got a park in Kansas or Idaho and it's a smoking great deal, it probably isn't going to matter. We're not your guy. If you're a broker. So, but if you call and you got a park that's somewhere within that 2 hour radius, and we're probably going to go harder at it than pretty much anybody else. And we have the ability to use that construction team to, operationally turn that thing around better than most folks do. So it really kind of is the secret sauce for us to be able to efficiently, get projects done and be able to, pay a competitive price for it, so that, being within that couple hour radius. I think, in terms of, like what's in the buy box, like a lot of people, we want to have the 50 pads at least, we want to be able to have, 10 acres or something like that to be able to expand. But, if we're in that, kind of 2 hour radius, there's more flex in that. Typically we're not going to go pick up, a 1 acre parcel and that's got 3 sites on it or whatever. But there's just more flexibility because of the geography that we're working in. I think, one other thing I kind of want to hit on just for a quick second, Brent kind of talked about the new development thing. And I don't know if hopefully I'm not stealing your next question here, but I really think that that is what I think we're on the cusp of a change here. And, there's been, I know there's still a lot of fragmentation out there in the MH market. So there's a lot of consolidation that can still occur. I get that. But I think that, a lot of the larger assets, and you get economy of scale when you buy larger assets, and those are the more appealing because you can do more. You can create a better all around asset for your clientele when you have a larger portfolio or a larger single site asset. It's harder to acquire those. There's just not as many 500 pad parks that are coming on the market that are available for sale at reasonable prices that are not 5 caps or 4 caps or something like that. So I think the opportunity for development is going to continue to grow, and there's some folks out there that are starting to do it, and obviously we're a part of that. I think that's where the industry is going to go, and I think that's the future is the ground up development, and there's just so many positive things to it. You can obviously offer amenities when you're building them. You've got new infrastructure. If you can choose your site and your location, so you don't necessarily need to go to the municipality that is going to give you. Like when you buy an existing asset, you're buying it in a municipality that, may, dislike your product and really give you a hard time. And you have a lot that you have to overcome. And that can be a really difficult thing. Well, now you have the choice of being able to find a municipality that's going to go and support you. I got a buddy who says capital goes where it's wanted. And so, if you are investing, tens of millions of dollars into a new ground up development, you can go somewhere where, folks aren't coming out with pitchforks, to run you out of town. And so some people are going to appreciate that you're offering this service of affordable housing to a much needed clientele. Every community needs people who need affordable housing, right? They are the people that when the rubber hits the road, they're the ones that are making things happen in our communities. And so every community needs those people, and those people need a place to live, and they deserve a nice place to live. And so the future to be able to provide that, in my opinion, is going to be through ground up development. And so we're excited to be a part of that. And I think that's the next stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love this topic, this new development piece. And you hit on so many important elements there as far as working with, areas where zoning isn't as big of a challenge, where you're more, welcomed in, that they do see this as a solution or one of the solutions for affordability in housing, because that's obviously one of the biggest talking points right now in any aspect of real estate, right? It's not just MH, it's not just rentals, it's not just owned properties, it's every type of property. Affordability continues to be a major topic. And I really love that idea around, capital going where it's wanted. This idea that the capital's out there and the people that have access to that capital want to put it in places where it can be used well and where it's welcomed, right? They don't want to fight these uphill battles. They want to deploy that capital in ways that's meaningful and it can be used quickly, right? They don't want to hit all these roadblocks as they're trying to get there. So when you're looking at these new developments, maybe break down how they are different than existing. You talked about amenities, you talked about infrastructure. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are just changing the game as it comes to these parks that these people want to live in?
I'll start. You hit on a few of those. So when you start to do these new developments, and we're about to wrap up our first true out of the ground development just north of Mobile, that's 65 pads. And then subsequently, we're going to start a new 300 pad development in Baldwin County that we're about to kick off in the next month or two. And, when you start to build these and you're using new product, I think the first eye opener for many people is that a lot of the new manufactured housing product looks fantastic. Like, it really looks like site built homes. And I don't think that's what they have in their mind, because, everybody has the same stigma and they have the same idea of what they remember it looking like in the 70s and the 80s and to some extent the 90s. But what you see now, once you build a neighborhood like this and you have total creative control over the layout and the size and the plat and how it looks, you can build it to look like a site-built neighborhood with an amenity central focus to it. So pool, clubhouse, pickleball courts. I mean, when you start to add things like this, like the desirability for your community goes up quite a bit because it's brand new. The product looks really good. As soon as you walk through and see like a decorated model of a new manufactured house, all the things that you thought you were going to see are blown away immediately. And so I think having something like that becomes a new way to look at the industry. And so, as Bryce mentioned, there's not a lot of properties out there that people are building and then turnkey selling away. A lot of them are long on the properties because they want to hold it, fill it, maintain it, because there's a lot of value to it. But at the end of the day, we feel like it's a way for us to build a bit of a defensible model in that there's not a lot of people doing it in our corridor. Certainly in our part of the, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia footprint. And for that, it's exciting to us because we're creating a market almost. We're creating a new manufactured housing development market. And, the more entrenched we can get in that and start to support our growth model, the better off, the community will be for availability. We saw some statistics when we were at MHI that somebody was talking about, orders for manufactured houses from the 90s to now. And I'm gonna butcher this a bit, but I think that at a top level, something like 350,000 orders for manufactured houses in the late 90s. As of now, where there's a lot of momentum behind the industry, it's like 150,000. And so you can confirm this with the manufacturers, and it's a big gap. And what that means for us is that there's an extremely large potential for opportunity to fill that void of affordability that has been created over that period of time, where you have, wage increases did not pace cost increases. And so people just can't afford the average starter home in many cases, especially, blue collar workers that are out there, looking for homes they can afford and raise a family in. That's nice, has the same amenities as anything else, but it's at a price point, that's feasible, right? And so having the ability to do this in the geography that we're in, provides that. And so I think, that for us, certainly as a business that wants to grow, is a good opportunity. But for all the other reasons that we want to help in the affordable housing segment, offers all of those potential opportunities as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of opportunity out there. And as you're talking through that, I believe earlier you mentioned that you're primarily tenant occupied or tenant owned focused. And that's one of the things that's interesting about the manufactured housing space is that there is kind of both options out there, right? Where you can be selling to the tenant and having that recurring revenue on the actual pad on the lot versus the ones that are actually more renter focused. And no matter what path you go, there's all types of opportunities there to provide high quality, affordable options. And what's really interesting is the last couple of years, I keep hearing more and more about this like build to rent model in kind of the single family world, right? Where they're building single family homes in communities with amenities that are designed to be rented. And it was really kind of funny because the first time I heard about it, I was like, wait, that's kind of what the manufactured housing world has been doing forever.
Right.
Maybe not with all the amenities and so forth, but in some places they were. So again, whether you're focused on having it tenant owned or tenant rented, it doesn't really matter. There's huge opportunity to create these high quality communities that are great for whether it's senior living or families, or it doesn't really matter. It can be really molded into whatever that community needs at a rate that's much more affordable than stick built.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% true. And we see that a lot too with what we're doing. And look, I think sometimes the market dictates, what should be built, in certain decade tranches of the cycle, right? And so you see a lot of credit challenges, a lot of interest rate challenges, and a lot of things that make it very hard to, afford certain things. And I think at the end of the day, offering another option, right, is certainly how we look at it. And we are a tenant-owned home model. That does not mean we don't have some that rent. Our goal is never to have a portfolio of long-term rentals. It's to, we'll do rentals and lease option purchases for cash flow. But at the end of the day, we want to convert them to homeowners. Like that's our goal. And so we don't mind, dipping our toe in the rental side of the world because, sometimes, that's an option that we need to offer because not everybody gets approved for whether it's, DTI requirements or credit requirements. Like it gives them an option, but we always have the long-term goal of converting them where we can.
Well, talk me through a little bit about how technology feeds into your strategy, because we've talked about kind of the structure overall, right? That you've got the management side, you've got the sales side, you have the construction side, and how the vertical integration really allows you to dictate what you do as a business and have a lot of control over the final product. But there's lots of different ways that people scale. And I'd love to know how you are using technology to enable scalable growth as well.
Sure.
You're definitely more savvy than I am.
So certainly one of the things is we want to consolidate wherever we can into single platforms. And, obviously, ironically, Rent Manager is our tool of choice, and we, want to put all of our primary data into that tool. And so that's one area where technology helps us scale better. It puts everything behind a single pane of glass, right? So all of our team can look at the same screens and see the same information. And we struggled with that in the past because one of the byproducts of growing extremely fast is that you put fixes in place along the way to get you where you're trying to go. And that's great. And it's great that you can do that. But you get to a point where you're thinking, well, okay, we can't manage this for twice the size of where we are now. So we've got to make some decisions. So that's one area. Bryce and I and Lloyd, certainly, we all like to dabble in technology. And so we certainly use a lot of AI tools. We've tried it from everything from our sales process, trying to automate our lead flow and lead management process, to our accounting side, using some of these AI tools to automate some of the analysis and analytics, and then certainly we use it to augment our manpower. Basically when we have things that are very time consuming, we're not afraid to use the Chat GPTs or Claudes or whatever tools of the world to help shorten that timeline to put together a quick document or something that we can use in a presentation. So we're always leaning into that area to see where we can help make ourselves a bit more productive without having to go overstaff and crush the overhead, which is not a recipe for success, but it's certainly where we want to use it. And then, as we look forward, every time we go to a new conference, there's a new set of tools that are coming out, right? There's new software, and there's always either a bolt-on tool to existing software or something that's brand new that nobody's thought of. And to me, that's one of from my early days of my background, that's something that's intriguing to me. And it's something that I think we'll continue to kind of dabble in as we go forward. But I guess the punchline for us is we want to make sure that it's a rational use of technology, not just, hey, let's throw technology at it. We want to make sure it's something that, builds our capabilities and allows us to scale with it.
Yeah, I hear similar things from other people as far as I like that word rational. A lot of people will say things like, well, it just has to make sense, or we don't want to replace humans in places where only humans really can do the work at this point, and have some guardrails around, especially AI tools and automations and things like that, to make sure that we're not getting too far out of bounds with how we interact with our end users, right? Those customers, the clients, the residents really deserve a good experience. And a lot of times that means a human being involved in the process. So, I love hearing that. And then obviously the consolidation of technology is one of the areas that we see a lot of the most opportunity for growth. And you're a great example of this, whether you're acquiring new parks, new communities, or building some on your own. As you do that, if you're getting everything on the same pieces of technology, all of a sudden the access to data and the reporting and the amount of effort that goes into all of that really reduces over time, right? It's when you have all these, Frankenstein technology solutions that have too many different options and reports and so forth that you can't merge together, where things become really challenging. So, you had talked about, a little bit about, capital earlier. We've talked about affordability. We probably could even talk about legislation, but I'd love to, pick your brain, both of your brains a little bit on kind of where things are headed next. You're very forward thinking as a company, the way that you've structured things, the way you think about things. But I'd love to know, what do the next 3 to 5 years look like in the MH space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I heard an interview with Cavco CEO. I think it was on CNBC maybe a year or so ago, something like that. And he had talked about how the cost to construct a home, a manufactured home, was like a third of the price, right, of a site-built home. And so those numbers, are so significant that I think it's impossible for a site-built manufacture to overcome those. And so I think that, manufactured homes are obviously the way of the future. And we're seeing so many really cool ways in which those are being applied, whether that's, in single family subdivisions, where, deeded fee simple lots are being developed, or if it's in a manufactured housing community. I think it's interesting. My opinion of the benefits of a manufactured housing community versus a subdivision where everything is fee simple has really changed. I think that at one time I used to think the fee simple was the way to go. It was better for everybody to individually own the land. I don't believe that anymore. I think that it's better for the community. I think it's better for the residents. I think that just overall you can get a better quality, nicer product for everyone involved in a manufactured housing community. And so I really see that that's going to continue to grow. You take something off of the plate for people to have to manage. You have the ability, municipalities, instead of, the code enforcement guy having to go around and speak to 500 different residents, the code enforcement person can now go to a single point of contact, and that's the management company, which is better able to manage and control those things. So I think that this business model is going to grow in the future. And as we need housing for our workforce, I think it's going to continue to grow. And I see that, new development, kind of like I mentioned before, I think that that's the future. And we want to be on the cutting edge of that. And so, Brent mentioned, we have, between what we have in Mobile, we got about 150 new home sites that are being built in Mobile, and we got about another 350 in Baldwin County. So, our goal would be, just to continue to grow that. And I'd like for next year for us to be able to build about 500. And eventually I'd like to be able to scale up to where we're doing, 1,000 plus a year. And so we think that that's the future. I'll continue to do acquisitions and bring on existing, parks into the portfolio. And then we'll continue to grow, into other geographies. I don't see us, heading out to, Oregon or Washington, but, we love the Sun Belt. And so I think that, we'll continue to grow in this geography. And I think a lot of the development that we will do will be of the 300 space, community. And the reason why we want to develop communities of that size is because you can achieve economy of scale. And it's really cool to be able to go and do a CapEx project that changes the community, building a new pool or building something because it's generating enough revenue to be able to support doing that. And so those are exciting projects. And when you have a small park that's 20 pads, it's hard to generate enough revenue off of that to be able to do these significant CapEx projects that really transform the community. You can do that when you're at 300. And so I would like to see us continue to do those type of projects. So.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think that's exactly where it's headed. And, I came from or had exposure to the single family residential model. And in all cases, it was exactly as Bryce discussed. How do you reduce costs, right? You've got so many trades and so many supply chain channels that you have to deal with that it's almost unavoidable. And so the way that was always addressed in single family was, let's order prefabricated trusses, let's order prefabricated framing packages. And suddenly you're ordering parts of a prefabricated house, right? And so it makes logical sense that it would start to move in this direction, because now, you can control the weather because they're built indoors. You can control the trade base because they work for you. And suddenly you definitely have economies of scale. And I think financially that helps. And, look, there's, everybody's aware now there's legislation that is trying to change a bit of how manufactured housing is classified, right? And there's something that's going through, Congress now that talks about removing the metal frame that is on the bottom of it and putting it on a concrete slab. And sounds like a very minor change, right? But the reality is, and time will tell, we don't know, but I mean, I typically would be able to reclassify that as real property instead of personal property. And when you do that, it opens up an entirely different line of financing, right? For individuals that are now having to do chattel financing, can now look at more standardized types of mortgages that have longer amortization periods, better interest rates, and things of that nature. So we'll see, right? That's an exciting time. But I mean, with all of those forces kind of moving in the same direction, we don't have a crystal ball, but it sure feels like that's the direction that it's moving, to create a really viable alternative to, current home pricing. And I think that's one of the things that, should all of those things happen, it could only help the consumer, and we're on board for that.
Yeah, we're following a lot of those items really closely as well, because we do think it could change a lot within this industry. And again, I think we have always a unique view because we are working with our customers that use our software in many different areas, right? Manufactured housing is a big portion of it, but multifamily, single family, even commercial. So we hear all types of different things. But when we hear about legislation that could fundamentally change how the manufactured home is classified as a piece of property, that is really exciting for us. And then when we talk to companies like you, they're at Kaliber, and hearing what you're focused on in the quality side of it, and the amenity side, and the life experience, or the lifestyle experience, we get really, really excited, because we actually we've always believed in this area of the market, but there's all of these headwinds that we were always facing, and a lot of it's shifting. I think the sentiment that a lot of people have towards manufactured housing will change over time as companies like yours build these really impressive properties. And one of the things I've heard a lot is this idea that, a lot of people just prefer to rent. It's a lifestyle choice. And I do think that's true. But I think part of that is tied to the perceived risk of owning a property, a home, where you don't really understand all the mechanics that are going into it and all of the things that need to be maintained. And when you look at a manufactured home and moving into more of a community mindset, I actually think a lot of people would actually prefer to own that. At the end of the day, I think they're going to see it as a lower risk. I think they're going to see it as a better lifestyle choice than renting long term. So it'll be interesting to see. And you kind of made a comment earlier about how there's different, opinions of what's best in different times and eras. And I think we'll see a big shift. And we're really excited about it at our company, and really excited to partner with companies like yours that kind of have that same alignment.
Absolutely. No, I think I think the future is bright, right? I think regardless of how we approach it or others approach it, it's moving, it's happening, right? And changes are afoot. So yeah, we're excited to be in the industry for sure.
Absolutely. Well, as we kind of turn the corner towards the end of this episode, obviously we've talked a lot about what Kaliber's doing, but a lot of actually what the industry is seeing, and kind of how things are changing, and how there's a lot of momentum moving in this direction. So as we kind of wrap up, I'd love to get, maybe some final thoughts on maybe looking into that crystal ball, maybe some challenges that our industry needs to solve together, or maybe some areas that are uncovered yet that maybe your company is focused on, or maybe you're not willing to share some of those secret ideas that you have kind of cooking in the background. But would love just some final thoughts on kind of where you're at today, where you're headed, and where maybe some of those most important challenges to uncover and overcome are.
Sure. I've got two top of mind. I would say one good, one kind of challenging, right? So on the good side, one thing we see a lot now are much more sophisticated investors coming into the space. It used to be not the case. It certainly has changed quite a bit. And as that evolves, different sources of capital with much more creative deal structures and capital structures are coming into play. And that opens up a lot of opportunity for us too. But it also means that we've got to manage ourselves in a more sophisticated way too, right? Because they're coming in asking questions. Certainly on the new development side, they're much more sophisticated in how they're looking to participate or add capital to those deals. And so the questions are very detailed. And so we find ourselves, having to up our game on that front quite a bit. Even on the acquisition side, people are more savvy on what the product is. And so, while there was speculation around how it would grow and how it would mature, I think, those questions are proven. I think now are we looking at one park, multiple parks, portfolio deals? I mean, it's very different. So that's good. I'm excited about that. On the challenging side, insurance. Hands down, it's one of the single biggest increases in our cost structure across the board. And I know it's not just us. I know everybody faces that, right? We have the challenge of being in a coastal area, so there's a few more contributing factors to us, like wind and things like that. But insurance by and large has just continued to escalate very quickly, and I think it's a challenge for the industry as a whole. I don't know what the resolution is. I don't know if there's somebody who's going to create a captive out there and find a way to really address this head on, or if there's other ways to do it, right? And maybe the insurance industry gets more sophisticated too at some point. We can only hope. So we'll see. But that has been a challenge, I think, in our eyes when it comes to kind of our expense structure.
Yeah, I would second on that. I mean, without a doubt, hands down, the insurance thing is a major problem, and I would agree. I think it's probably the number one biggest challenge out there. And obviously, like I said, or like Brent said, we're on a coastal, coastal area, so that makes it even a little bit more challenging for us. I guess the other thing that I would kind of throw in there is that I think that access to capital, from the floor planning to being able to do these rental conversions, and there's a number of companies that are out there that are doing these. 21st and automatic, and and there's others that are doing, but I think that there's competition. Competition benefits everyone because it basically it corrects where there's it corrects the market, right? It self-corrects the market, and it becomes more competitive, and people, basically have to be more competitive in the offering that they provide to the customer. And I think that as the industry continues to mature, I think there's some really, it's financially, very, there's really good returns in this business for a lot of those lenders. And I think that as others see that, and more lenders come into the marketplace, whether it's their floor planning, homes for communities, especially, a lot of, I kind of talked about the new development that's occurring. And so, if you're building 300 pad parks, you got to infill, 300 homes. So that's a lot of capital that, and so I think that, I see that development is going to be the future for the industry. And so there's got to be a financial component that goes with that to be able to support that infill. And so I think that that's coming. I think that there's, and that's welcome. I think it's good for everyone. And then, the same thing goes for, the funding for, being able to do those developments. A lot of that stuff is being done at the from local regional banks, and so I think that as people become more sophisticated in seeing that, developing large communities is a lucrative business, there'll be more people that'll be willing to lend on that. And so, when you talk to people that have been in the business for a long time, they'll talk about 30 years ago, you couldn't find a bank, everything was just pure owner finance. And so, the industry changes when capital comes into it and when there's access to capital. And I think that, I look forward to that continuing to evolve and there becoming more access to capital, because I think you can get more things done when that occurs. And at the end of the day, the beneficiary of that is the resident that's living in the community is going to have a better quality of life because there's a nicer community that's been built, because there was access to capital at a lower price, and you weren't having to pay 15%. Now you can pay 5%. And so, that benefits the guy that's living in that community at the end of the day. And you get a more professional, better quality managed property. And that's another thing too, that I think is there's a consolidation within the industry. I know that there's a lot of fear out there about the consolidation within the industry, and that, you have companies that are buying up these properties. And I have to tell you, like most people, the vast majority of the properties that we buy are from, single park owners, or maybe they own a couple of parks. And, I've seen in the 10 years or about that we've been in the industry that, generally speaking, this is not, 100% true, right? So there's bad actors in every portion to some extent, but generally speaking, the communities that are managed, professionally managed, generally tend to be of a higher, better quality than the communities that are owned by, somebody that's one off. And that's usually, in my opinion, because of access to resources, financial resources, access to capital to be able to do that. And so, when you have somebody that's doing something every day, full time, managing that property, and that's their 100%, it's not just one person. You have a team of people that are centered around making sure that that community is getting better. They can accomplish more than just one person that's doing it as like a part-time job, or one person that's, having to be everything from the bookkeeper to the manager to the, handyman to the capital improvement guy. I've been there. I've been that guy. That's a very, very tough role to fill. And so I think as more capital comes into the industry and the industry consolidates, and I think the beneficiary of that, and I know this is a little contrarian, I think the beneficiary is the guy that's on the ground. He's going to get a nicer, better, safer house to live in. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. No, and that's really well said, because I do think consolidation, while at surface level might seem a little scary to some people, but it really is beneficial. If you compare how the manufactured housing world operates compared to, the multifamily world or something like that, one of the big differences is that scale, that size, that access to capital, all those things that it does have a trickle down impact when you can get that capital at a much lower rate, more consistent rate, easier access. All of that does really change the game for the actual resident that's using and living on the property, in the property. So I get really excited about that. I agree. As long as there are companies that are the same quality and caliber as Kaliber Management, then I think we're headed in the right direction, because I can hear it when I talk to you and I hear others talk about your company, that you're doing it right. You're doing it for the right reasons. And yes, you want to grow your company, you want to do all the right things, but never at the expense of the resident experience and the quality of the life that they get to live while on the property in the community. So I'm really excited for it as well. I think we're heading to some great places that really help with affordability that we continue to hear about day in and day out across real estate. So, well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I'm really excited about what your team is doing. I'm excited about where the industry is going. If people want to learn more about what Kaliber is doing, what's a good way for our audience to reach out, maybe follow along and keep up to date?
Yeah, look, we love talking to people, so we're happy to get on the phone or email back and forth or whatever is convenient. But the easiest way to reach us is you can reach me directly at email, brentd@kalibermanagement.com, Kaliber with a K. And Bryce is simply Bryce at
kalibermanagement.com. And you can also go to our website, kalibermanagement.com. Kaliber spelled with a K, Kaliber management.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time today. We'll drop some of those links into the show notes so our audience can follow up, learn more, maybe have a follow-up conversation and see what you guys are doing. And again, just try to follow along, because I think you're going to move fast. I know earlier, Bryce, you had mentioned getting to the point where you're adding 1,000+ homes a year, and I didn't see Brent flinch or break a sweat. So I think you're on the same page and want to see that rapid growth. So that'll be exciting to see.
My hands are shaking underneath. I'm very
well, thanks again for your time today and this great conversation. And I want to thank our audience as well for joining us for another episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a colleague and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next one. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.